Holy Happy Hour Batman! I am Ben. I am an Episcopal priest and the co-founder of the All Ports Open Network. On this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by truly awesome heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk about all kinds of stuff. Honestly, mostly game design philosophy, but also we do talk about life, faith, spirituality, philosophy, psychology, sports sometimes, drinks often, and just sort of whatever else comes up. We love to talk about here on the show. Tonight on Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by Jack Crawford, who is the project lead for the game Lands of Adversity, which is an upcoming grim myth game that showcases the gritty realities of living in an ancient era fantasy world built to balance interesting lore, rich storytelling mechanics, and a rule set that has depth and customization in mind. We're going to talk about all of that stuff in just a few moments with Jack. Plus, get to know him like we always do with all of our designers that we have here on the show. So we're very much looking forward to that. So stick around. You're not going to want to miss it. Before we get into the show this week, though, I do have some very exciting announcements. Also, just thanks to all my Holy Happy Hour Batman viewers out there who watch. Thank you to all of you for, I don't know, your patience with the show over the last month or so. Things in my family and my personal life have been topsy-turvy over the last month or so. We've had several losses in our family, two pretty jarring deaths in our family, and it's caused a lot of crazy stuff like spontaneous trips to Florida. So I'm back. I'm in Pennsylvania where I live, and we're back on schedule with Holy Happy Hour Batman. So I appreciate all of you with your patience during this time as things have been a little bit topsy-turvy, and with the guests for their willingness to be flexible as things have happened, like illnesses and other things. So I do have some really exciting announcements along those lines before we get into the episode. And then I have some regular housekeeping stuff. So next Monday, I'm really excited about this. One thing we had to cancel, we had to postpone, was our Holy Happy Hour Batman anniversary episode. Our 1-year anniversary episode where Meg Baker is joining the show to interview me. We had to postpone. So it is going to be next Monday. Legendary designer of games like Apocalypse World and many, many, many other games. Meg will be coming back on the show. She's going to be she's a recurring guest, but this time she's going to be our first ever guest host. She's taking over Holy Happy Hour Batman next Monday. And I will be the guest. If you watched our episode with Meg when it first happened, the original one, Meg threw out the idea of interviewing me for the anniversary special, which I blinked and is here now. So we're here. We've already gotten to it. This time flew by. You're not going to want to miss it. It's next Monday, which is the Monday, April 18th, 7:30 p.m. Assuming I get back in time from traveling, we will be on schedule at 7. So, knock on wood or cross yourself, whatever it is that you do. Those are the things I do. So I usually do both. All right. Anyway, in addition, I want to share another big and exciting announcement with you all, except for I'm clicking on the wrong stuff on my screen. What's going on here? I have another exciting announcement for you all. The TTRPG design wing of the All Ports Open Network, our podcast and streaming network, we are now releasing games. I published my first game release over the weekend on itch.io. I released it for the Together We Go Game Jam. It's an OSR game jam happening right now from Plus One EXP. Tony Vicinda, who runs Plus One EXP, was on this show as a guest in the past. Tony's a friend, really awesome person. Love everyone at Plus One. Love Together We Go Jam and games like Down We Go and Through the Void. And so my game is in that Together We Go game jam. I wanted to get it done in time for the jam. It's in sort of a beta, a playtest release of it. That's what I could get done in order to release it for the jam. So I would love for you to check it out. You can find all of our Apon games at itch.io by searching for Apon Games, or you can just go Apon Games, APON, apongames.itch.io. And my game is called To whom shall we go? It's an OSR game about pilgrims with different beliefs about the same God making a pilgrimage to find words of eternal life to bring back to a hurting and broken world. It is a single sheet game. It exists entirely right now on one A5 sheet. And everything you need to play is right there. Game character creation takes a minute, 3 minutes. I mean, at most. And you can jump right into the game. I hope to create more content for it. And as I do, if you buy the game, it's a $3 plus model. You can pay what you want for it if you pay, and if you buy it, you'll get whatever I release for it later. So I hope you'll consider checking that out. But really, what I hope you'll do is go to our Apon Games itch page and follow us so you can see, because we're going to be doing some other really cool stuff coming out soon. We'll be crowdfunding our game, The Hard Lessons. We're going to itch fund that there on itch.io. That's a game I'm very excited to bring you. It's a game by Joshua Wise, my Apon co-founder, and I've been working on layouts for it and other things, and I'm helping to bring it to release. And we're going to be itch funding that soon. We'll have more details on the timing of that. We don't have that yet for me to announce, but keep an eye out. The best way for you to find about that is definitely to follow us there at Itch. And it would be extra amazing if you would share Apon Games with others in your social media spheres so that you can help spread the word and help us to build a contact list for these upcoming things that we're doing. Lastly, this show is a production of allportsopen.com. Check out our website for our lineup of podcasts and streams, sharing, making, and talking about great stories with shows like Weeping Cedars and my own teen superhero comedy drama show. I don't know why I said drama. Delinquent Comics. It's a Masks actual play podcast and so much more. So, all right, let's get into the show a little bit here. So it is happy hour, and that means we've got a cocktail on the screen, as you can see. This cocktail is called, it's inspired by our guest today, inspired by Lands of Adversity. I call this cocktail Surviving Adversity. This is a really fun cocktail. I'm not drinking for the season of Lent, full disclosure, which means I didn't get to drink this cocktail today when I made it. I am super hyped to drink this cocktail. If you are out there and you try it, maybe I'll convince Jack to make this seriously the official cocktail of the project, because I want more game designers to do that when I have them on the show so that they'll have people drink my drinks. But this one I'm super hyped about. All right, folks, and I'll tell you why. So first of all, it's just a really cool drink. It's bourbon, coffee liqueur, orange bitters, and black pepper bitters, which I spelled pepper wrong on the screen. It's so embarrassing. Black pepper bitters. And you're going to serve this up. So what you're going to do is you're going to take ice and those ingredients, and you're going to put them into like a mixing glass and stir them to blend them rather than shake them. And then you're going to kind of like gently pour that into a chilled glass, something like a martini glass or any other glass you would serve a drink neat or up in is fine. But the coolest part is what you're going to do, a bar trick called flaming the orange peel. This is a really cool bar trick. You may have seen someone do it at a fancy cocktail bar sometime. What you do is you take the cocktail and you take the orange peel and you hold it above, and you want to set the cocktail down so you have a free hand. And then you take like a lighter or a match and you squeeze the oil of a really big piece of orange peel into the cocktail through the flame of your lighter or your lit match or whatever. And it kind of sparks the oil, and some of it gets down into the cocktail and some singed elements get down into the cocktail. And it adds a little bit of like the aroma of the orange, adds a little bit of a smoky aroma. It's a really geeky cocktail thing, but it's cool. It's really cool if you can pull it off, especially if you're going to make a drink for somebody else. Maybe not if it's just like you making a cocktail for yourself, but I thought it was a cool way to sort of take the idea of adversity and to put it into this cocktail. So Surviving Adversity, it's a peppery, if you use a bourbon that is sort of a peppery bourbon, so maybe something with like a lot of rye. I always recommend New Liberty Distillery in Philadelphia because it's my local distillery. And it's got a good rye character to it. You could use a rye instead of a bourbon for this cocktail, and it would also be good. But it's a really interesting mix of flavors: orange, black pepper, coffee, and bourbon. And so, yeah, I'm really excited about this one. Like, I make cocktails every week for the show. This one I'm particularly hyped about. So, all right. Well, without further ado, let's bring our guest on the show, and we can maybe talk about this cocktail and much more. Jack, welcome to Holy Happy Hour Batman.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
No, thanks for taking the time
Um,
to come on the show. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was interested to see what you'd come up with a cocktail to describe our game.
What do you think?
Uh, well, the idea of black pepper being the flavor of adversity here, or at least the inclusion of that
Yeah.
surprised me. I was interested in it, and I've already pledged with my friends that because this game is made by a team.
Yes, of
I,
course.
I, I told them, hey, we're all gonna have to try this, whatever it is that he comes up with. So I don't know if it's gonna be officiated or anything, but we're definitely going to have to try it.
I'm really glad you're going to try it. I appreciate that, and I hope you enjoy it. I really am hyped about this one. I wanted to make sure. I don't know why, but I was stuck in my head that I wanted to make sure this. Maybe I sensed you all were definitely going to try it because I had it stuck in my head that I wanted to make this one particularly good, and I really think it because the bitters are not the black pepper bitters are not too intense. They're really not. They're especially if you
Okay.
only do like 2 dashes of them, it'll just like really bring out sort of the pepperiness of the bourbon or rye that you use.
I don't know if I can pull off the bar trick you described with the orange peel, but I can try.
Yeah, I mean you can try. I forgot to put my disclaimer whenever I do a flaming drink for the show. I always put a disclaimer like, please be extra careful when you play with fire and do not blame me,
Absolutely.
especially if you start a fire. Oh, by the way, I was going to tell people in my little cocktail segment. I forgot. I haven't tried it yet. I saved it over here. It's the season of Lent for those who celebrate such things, which I do, of course. And one of the things I do during Lent is I don't drink alcohol, and so hence why I didn't drink the drink today. However, I have a non-alcoholic beer here, and it's from Athletic Brewing Company, who makes this is not an ad for them. Although if you want to sponsor the show, I will take it. Um, it is a non-alcoholic beer from them called Run Wild. It's a non-alcoholic IPA. I have not tried it yet. I got it right here, and I saved it for stream to try. So I know this is not about your game. I'm sorry. I'm being self-indulgent. Yeah, that's good. It tastes like a um. It honestly, if I was to just like give an brutally honest description of it, I would say it's a pretty light and easy drinking IPA, like a session ale, one that would be, I'd be like, yeah, it's all right. It's not bad. It's good. It's not great. It's not mind blowing, but for being non-alcoholic, it kind of is. Like it's certainly better than it's leagues better than like O'Doul's or something like that. It tastes like real beer.
Hmm.
It's 70 calories. Um, so it's also like if you care about that, it's also way less calories than a normal beer. So anyway, that's what I'm drinking on the show tonight. I see you got a giant stein there that you're drinking out of.
Hey, if I was going to show up on an RPG podcast today, I had to get decked out in the Stein.
I have almost that and possibly that exact stein that you have there.
Yeah, this was a gift from a friend in one of my RPG groups for Christmas one year.
Yeah,
He's very generous with all of us.
yeah. That was a gift for a bachelor as part of a bachelor. I won't out the person, but as part of a
Hmm.
bachelor party, I got one of those. So anyway, we can now move past the self indulgent section. Uh, Jack, thanks for making the time to come and talk to us about Lands of Adversity.
And likewise, thanks for making time to ask me about Lands of Adversity.
Yeah, do you want to give us
Um,
the shape and
the, the,
background and
the
everything? Yeah.
Man, the readout you gave before was pretty good. But in general, Lands of Adversity is a fully featured role playing game. So not like much of an abridged one. It's going to be, well, right now it's over 100 pages, I'm sure. We have it chopped up. So we've been developing the game for about 2 years now, and about 6 years ago, it was a play setting for Dungeons and Dragons, and I've been running this world that the game is set in for about 16 years or more of role playing, and that's where kind of the lifeblood of it is that this has all been lived story. And I was I was brought on to write for Windmill Slam Games, another indie group on that's you can find out in the Sphere, to write for their fifth edition content. And starting with that, I was thinking, well, because they recruited me off of all this, maybe I should make it, take this project more seriously. And so I approached some of my friends. I think it was right after COVID started in that like June, a couple months into COVID. I was like, we have a lot of this free time. Let's devote time each week, like we would to playing an RPG session, to writing the book. And as long as we take it like a hobby, I'm sure over time we could actually get something out of this. And like, even if we don't sell it, we could, make a game that we could be proud of and really want to play. And so for over the last 2 years, we've been designing a rule set alongside rescrubbing and building up the lore from the ground up. And as of right now, we're approaching our alpha build to start testing. And one thing I can say is that the project's taken a lot more before we could get to testing than we thought. We thought it would be like 2 months of just screwing around on the weekend and we'd have a game ready. And our ambitions have been quite far ahead of us.
Yeah. So that when we were talking before the show, you threw out the decade or 10-year amount of time, and I was like, whoa, because I wasn't expecting that necessarily, but that's super cool. I know we talked about it before the show, but the map behind you, you pointed to it for people watching, is the map of the world, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we have an updated version. I went digital when I got to like college, because I used to be an art student at one point, and so I put all that into this. All the writing experience I have, I put into it. So yeah, the map behind me I drew during high school. It was during an architecture class. Whenever I finished my homework, he said I could use the draft paper for whatever I wanted, and so I immediately saw a D&D map forming on it. And yeah, I've been playing this game for 16 years, with different groups, but all of them kind of like to watch what other people do when they interact with their characters or their stories in the future. The history you hear about, it's the last group that played in it or whatever. And so it's been very, very interesting for players to interact with each other, especially there was this one year where I got all of the groups from my college and my high school together, and we played this massive game with like 12 people around a table, and they're all interacting as their characters they had played before. And that was really interesting to me, just to see all these people, that didn't really know each other, but they all shared this.
Oh, that's
And
super
so,
cool. Yeah, that's really neat. It reminds me of a little bit of Monty Cook's game. What is it actually called? It's the one. Is it called The Spire? It's the one about like it's a city where it has a tower that's like endless levels up, and then also below the city, it's like endless levels down. I
man,
think.
that sounds interesting. I'm a big fan of Monty Cook. I have a lot of his books, but he's a really prolific
Yes.
TTRPG author.
So it's a.
So,
I can't believe I'm spacing on the name of the setting for right now, but it is a really cool. It might be the spot. I'm spacing on what it's called, but it's super cool. And it was a third edition. It was one of the first third edition D&D game settings. And it was a campaign that Monty ran. Um, and like so similarly, like people who are like especially in the third edition days, people who are
mhm.
big in Wizards of the Coast who worked and wrote were like involved in playing, and so like now and then it was published once, and now it's been published again for fifth edition or for the Monte Cook Games system that I can't believe I'm spacing on the name of right now, but Numenera, no, not Numenera, but whatever the name of that system. Oh my gosh, I am having a brain day for sure. But
I keep glancing over my library over there, wishing I could go look through it right now, but
right,
here we are.
right,
So,
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's now published again for those in those two systems. It was a Kickstarter, but a lot of the people that were player characters in those original Monty games are NPCs and things like that in the world, and that's such a cool way of fleshing out. I mean, it takes a lot of time. Like you said, you've been playing this world for 16 years or whatever. Like that's
oh
no
yeah.
small investment of time
Well,
and energy.
there's this one hallmark of the setting in that regard, and I'm kind of just saying this for my friends watching it later.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can see this. So there's a large empty area of the map here, and the reason for that is because that nation invaded the world, real world domination type thing at one point, And I said the players are going to have to solve this. I'm going to keep running this scenario until some group solves it. And for a good 5 years, different groups were just like, we'll avoid the war. And so this war drags on and on. And only this last year, with the group that is helping me write the book, did they actually approach the war and try to solve it. And so the
Mm,
current canon in our lore right now is based on that group and them stopping the war. But I would like to say that we deliberately, with the writing, leave spots open for DMs and
mm,
players to be central focuses of the lore. But yeah, in the current lore, the player group goes over there, and they are able to rouse all of the other player groups that never went,
mm,
and they were able to figure it out and get over there. And so this area is mapped now, but I left it unmapped until
mm.
players were to actually get there.
Is
So
it
everywhere that's mapped, players have been.
cool? Is that a real challenge to try to turn it from being a home game to a to a product basically, or like a published game, to have like to make space for your players, like the players who are going to buy and play this game, to be the stars, or be the heroes, be the central figures of their story. But is that a challenge?
I would say the biggest challenge was letting go of the parts that players have never touched.
Mm,
Because I established canon for like the Genesis story and stuff that I thought was real keen when I was like 14 years old.
mm,
Because that's how long I've been working on this,
yeah,
and it's just kind of always
amazing.
stuck around. And we're like, okay, now that we got rid of some like weird plot holes, we need to. So things have changed a lot from, but I don't think it's lost any of its authenticity. As far as leaving areas for new GMs and stuff, I think that's actually one of the easier parts of it for me, because I go, the motivation of creating this game is almost like, if you were to ask me like what is it you want to get out of this, I want to someday see some people writing conspiracy theories about what the truth is in this area that I've left blank, like, so where is so and so now, or
Mm,
artifacts being lost to time. And I think, well, because, sorry, losing my thought here, but
no, you're fine.
I'd say this world's been open for me to write in over and over, and so those same areas that I could write in my own game, I think the biggest challenge is keeping my personal campaigns I'm running out of the established canon.
Mm,
We go, okay, we're writing to this period of history. My personal campaign goes forward, but that's where all others' personal campaigns are going to go forward. So once
fascinating.
that last game happened where they ended that war, I was like, okay, this is current era, and
Hmm.
anything we play on further is not going to be in the book.
Yeah,
Um, and so, but no,
that's
yeah, I
fascinating.
think that leaving stuff open is probably like one of the more enjoyable parts of it, because it gives me this dream of what could a GM do with this, and I just sow in seeds. That's all it is,
That's
you know.
cool. No, that's really cool. It's really interesting to take the idea of like building something that you played in as that was yours, and then offering it to everyone else. It's just like it's a really cool way of, I don't know. It's one of the things that makes TTRPGs cool. Is like yeah.
TTRPGs are like living documents. You know what I mean? Any kind of like any module you find out there, it's a living piece of writing, kind of like our Constitution here in America. It's it's something that can change over time, and you leave to others to change. And what they make is just as valid as what it was.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I hope to leave here. Is I want to hear someday about somebody's experience that I wouldn't have thought of. Which is a lot of the reason people DM in the first place, is to hear what players would do that you wouldn't.
Hmm.
If everyone played my game like I would play it, I'd actually get very annoyed with myself over time.
Yeah, I mean,
you
I was
know?
kind of thinking about that same concept with the game that I released over the weekend, and how like there was some people talking about possibly streaming it for a different stream network, and like my initial thought was, man, I want some. I don't want to. I would run it on the stream, but I want somebody else to run on the stream because I want to see what they do with it. Like I want to see what somebody else
Right.
takes with it and does with it, because to me that's way cooler than whatever I would think of. I think. Um,
you know,
yeah,
I when I heard the concept, I mean, I've already read on your Twitter, but
yeah,
when I heard you explain the concept here at the beginning of two groups of people worshiping the same God and believing different things about them,
yeah.
I was like, if he designed that, he would love Lands of Adversity, because that's
Yeah.
one of our main focuses. religion in the world.
Yeah,
So
let's
we
get into
wanted to
this. Yeah,
design. Yeah, we wanted
yeah,
to design. There will be the look. This is how the world was made because the GM's got to know, and
sure.
players might want to know. But as far as the writing aspect of when you read the religions, they're from the perspective of the believers and stuff. And so one of our design philosophies about religions, philosophies, states, any kind of organization. No one in LOA is 100% right, but no one in LOA is like crazy evil. Like I can't understand these people. Kind of like everyone has 40 to 60% truth, and no more or less really than that. And we didn't want anyone to be the right guy, and we didn't want anyone to be the wrong guy either. I mean, there's obviously things that people might object to. There's bad guys, but I mean, one of the things about LOA that I think is interesting is that in traditional fantasy, you have this like a lot of the time you have that diametric good and evil, that we see in both mythology and modern religion of opposing forces. And in LOA, you have these gods are all not the creators of the universe. They're the children of the greater elder gods who are now gone. And now these rulers of the universe effectively are trying to maintain it as long as they can. So the gods' only motive is to keep the timeline as long as possible before the apocalypse. And what gives the god their domain is it's like their area of the world that they manage. And so if you look at the gods that way, there's not so much evil gods and good gods. There's just the god who owns evil, the god who owns good. And what they all do is that instead of this being this big war of heaven that's constantly going, in LOA, the gods have all made a truce agreement to like not war directly. And the way they do things in the world is that they watch mortality, and like mortals are able to come up with their own ideas out of like nowhere. Like we are able to be inspired and stuff. And so the gods kind of watch us to figure out how to change themselves, because the gods are able to they are the truest form of whatever they are. And so if something new comes up out of the world and becomes the more true version of them, so like justice, if we on this world decide justice means something else, then the god of justice will change with it. And
Hmm.
so these gods are kind of alien, almost Lovecraftian type beings, but
Hmm.
they're, I mean, a lot less eyes and tentacles for some of them. But they tend to be like removed from what we would consider humanity, and they tend to be more robotic or at least automatic in the way that they are very, um, just governance and not really moral creatures.
Hmm.
And then the religions are like they're the greatest person ever, or they're terrible. And we have some religions who are like, this person should be the absolute point of morality, and that god might just be there to manage this area of the universe, really, than more than concerned with mortals
Hmm.
themselves. And so it's kind of what do you do in a world where those those gods are kind of apathetic,
Hmm.
and yet you have to deal with certain problems that require I mean, you're living in this world. You have to find a philosophy to combat adversity, to figure out what you're going to do. And so there's a lot of things like the gods, like I said, they didn't create the world, and so to get the world to keep going, they took life from another universe, and with it came death, and that's kind of how like mortality started dying and stuff. And so one of the big things of like the macro lore, like the universe lore, is that death is not, kind of like the Garden of Eden idea. Death is not naturally part of this world, and so the gods and mortals are like a little confused by its presence, and so mortals have to kind of choose a god, because if they don't, they'll just be left to like a limbo space and decay and forget who they are after death. So they have to choose a god. But the gods aren't exactly always looking for mortals' best interests, and they might lie to mortals about who they are, or they might take advantage of their relationship with mortality to get the mortals to do what they want in the mortal realm. where the gods have all agreed not to go. And so there's these multiple layers to the religions. Um, I don't know.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So
I'm just wondering, it's an interesting take on sort of, a pantheon for like a fantasy pantheon. And I'm curious if that, if the ideas, sort of the foundational ideas for that came from anywhere in particular, like that, like did they kind of, where those concepts were born out of, or was it just sort of,
um, I once heard from a history teacher um, that the gods of ancient people, like Romans and stuff, they said that religion, or well, that mythologies are born from a people, like they make gods like themselves.
Mhm.
That's I heard that from a history teacher once, and that stuck with me because I was like, if gods were like normal people, that doesn't make them, um, you know, in contrast to some more modern religions like Christianity, where God is a perfect being. If we look at mythology, like polytheistic gods, they tend to be kind of normal people who make mistakes, and they tend to be more arbitrary. I mean, look at Zeus and try to say that he's a guide for morality, and you would get a good scoff out of that, right? Having a bunch of kids that he's kind of leaving to fight monsters and stuff, not really great. Hera threw Hephaestus off a mountain, right? Just because he looked ugly. So I was thinking about that, and I was like, well, what would a world be like if the gods were really just so apathetic to people and selfish? And it's kind of evolved from there, Um,
yeah, no,
but
that's
I
really
did have
cool.
a Catholic upbringing, actually.
Mm,
And when you were talking about Lenten promises, that's where
yeah,
this world really started.
really.
Was that my family used to give up all electronics and everything for the 40 days or whatever, and so that's where I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. And my
Really? Oh,
yeah,
this is cool. This is a
yeah,
first for the show where somebody there, because you always get into someone's. I was eventually going to ask you your TTRPG origin story, and like Lent is a very. That's the first time I've heard someone say that Lent was their D&D origin or TTRPG origin story.
well, if you have no
Yeah,
electronics for 40 days, then me and my millennial siblings are all going to play D&D for 40 days, and so you have a really great campaign when every night you play a chapter.
that's so cool. I'm so jealous of that, man. I wish my Lent this year was much more of that.
Yeah,
Then I'm gonna, you know what? I really like that no electronics Lent. I might force my child because, like, I feel like
it's pretty
I,
intense. Yeah,
yeah. Well, no, and it is, especially these days, right? And like, I couldn't do it, right? Like, I literally couldn't do it because if I tried to do it, like, well, I would have to like make exceptions, right? Like I couldn't do stuff like this, right? Like I mean,
hmm
like I couldn't do it. For like I'd have to make a whole list of
you have to
exemptions.
make reprieves and all that. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. But for my children though, like if it's more about like getting them to do other things, like I try to push them towards like they read a lot, but I try to push my kids towards like hey, why don't you pull out a TTRPG book from the shelf and just sort of read it or make a character. And my daughter used to make a bunch of characters and things like that. But I love the idea of like Lent being his time when you play a ton of games and you're off screen, so you're like playing a super long in-depth D&D campaign or something.
yeah.
It's
I
awesome.
mean, Lent was also, family risk night every
Okay.
weekend during Lent was pretty intense. That going to war with your family, literally, it's very scary. Um,
Yeah, we
but yeah,
played it.
it was
Yeah.
a good time, and the Catholicism again comes into why the world was created.
Mm.
My mother believed that invoking the names of demons gives them power, and so she's like, she read, she's like this book of the nine hells or whatever with um, for that very reason, because I know she's going to watch this later. I'm not going to evoke any names, but they're in D&D. They draw from both mythology and
Yeah.
what is in modern religion, origins, and there are names in there that she didn't want us to be repeating at the table, and so she's like, you have to make up your own stuff. And so literally I was mandated to both play D&D every year for a lot and to homebrew. And so I was
I love
so
that.
it was a good origin story, I guess, for me. And
There you
then
go.
once I got groups going and like later, um I haven't played, I mean, with exceptions, I've basically played TTRPGs every week for the last 16 years, and this is what I keep going back to as my main setting.
Which is that's a lot of consistency. The longest I think I ever played in like a homebrew setting was like maybe 3.5 years or so.
Yeah. Well, I was benefited greatly by moving into a town with an active game shop, and the owner would let me run a table there every Friday. The downside is I had to let everyone in, but I mean, I had a good time meeting a myriad of players. So
Yeah, and I'm wondering if like maybe this project wouldn't be becoming what it is now if you weren't in a situation where you had to let people in.
no,
Yeah.
no, it wouldn't be, because everybody who plays TTRPGs or designs them should keep in mind that your way of doing things is not the only way. And I was taught by my players more than I taught them about
Yeah.
looking at the game from different perspectives. There's some people who really just aren't into the deep roleplay thing.
Yeah.
There's other people who want to just not go into a cave. They want to play. I ran a one game that was a village campaign where everyone was the village council of an area in this world and just had to figure out everyday problems. And that's what a lot of LOA is about, is the emotional struggles of people. I don't know if you know this, but the game doesn't have like alignment like D&D might, or any kind of like morality system, but it does have a motivation system, and it has like a personality index type thing. And players don't just advance positively. You can also take afflictions, and social and mental afflictions come from. We have the same kind of system that Powered by the Apocalypse has, where I don't know if you're familiar with that. But you ask questions to gain XP, and we saw that. We were like, that's really good. We didn't rip off their questions or anything, but we were like, this is a really good idea for advancement. So we have our own questions and another set of questions for afflictions. And so, for example, if you were to lose a party member, you might ask yourself while you're doing your advancement, has this affected me in a personal way? Like, losing this party member, and you might have to take you either during advancement, it's like a self-reflection thing where you go, well, my character does miss them or whatever, but he's doing this to deal with it. But if your character can't deal with the loss of somebody, then you'd consider taking on an affliction, or your GM might say, okay, you're going to need to take on this affliction of I think one of ours that we came up with is separation anxiety, because if you were separated from a friend and something bad happened to them, you might have difficulty, and you take a small penalty when you're not near other party members because you don't know what's happening to them.
Mm.
So you advance both negatively and positively in this game, and we
That's
we
cool.
take kind of a unique approach where the idea is that we don't just have GM and player character, we have GM, player, and character, where the idea is the player's goal in the game is less to fight the numbers and get their character up, and so much as they're given their goal is to explore questions.
Mhm.
And so we kind of have this thing where the GM asks the question, will you defeat this necromancer, or something like that, or what will happen to the village of Fellbrook, whatever it is. And then the characters are made to answer that question, so it's like a question and answer. These characters will decide that question. And then the players say, these are 3 questions we have for the GM to answer. So, will my character do this, this, or that? Like, what are 3, like, it's hard to think of one on the spot, but maybe it's like, will Kelvin ever come over his fear of dragons, or something like that, and so those are kind of like backstory builders, but also those questions are how you determine if a campaign or adventure is over. When you've answered the GM's question,
that's cool.
Characters are that's when the campaign is over.
Interesting.
So,
yeah, that's really cool. One of the things I wanted to ask you was was the idea, the decision to sort of take a game that was a setting, basically, right? So take a setting, and it sounds like you played it mostly with Dungeons and Dragons, right? Given the
3.5.
lifespan, I was gonna say, given the lifespan is probably 3rd edition, right? Have you played any other editions in the setting, like 4th edition, 5th edition?
I've played fourth edition and fifth edition. I never brought the setting to them.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
I
So
used Pathfinder as
sure.
well.
Okay, so Pathfinder. Okay. The decision to take a setting basically and to take it out of D&D and make it a system too. That's a really interesting decision. I was curious, why, what made you decide to do that rather than just publishing it as a setting?
Right. So I went forward with publishing it as a setting first,
Okay.
and I mean, someone wants to go and dig for those links, they're out there.
Okay.
But it was just for my friends, and I plagiarized a lot of like rules,
Sure.
reflavoring them and stuff. I mean, that's what a lot of people do when they're starting out. It's just for my
Sure.
friends though, and but I was making it as a setting, and I was like, I'm gonna make this into a game, and I approached my GM. His name is Adam. He said I could name him in these kind of interviews,
Gotcha.
and he was a GM of mine at the same store that I mentioned before, and I said, hey, I know you're really good at rules and stuff. I want to come up with rules. Will you help me with my game rules? And he said, hey, look, stop. He goes, why do you want to make it a game setting? Why can't you use Dungeons and Dragons? I said, well, no real reason. I just want to make a rule set. He said, no. Until you find reasons you can't use D&D anymore, you should run it in D&D, and you'll find your reasons. Then you can make your rule set. You need to have focus and everything. And so I did that, and I also played as many games. This other piece of advice was to play as many games as possible.
Yeah.
And so I played like World of Darkness. I played, Powered by the Apocalypse, like I said, End of the World by Fantasy Flight, Star Wars, whatever.
Yeah.
I got my library.
Yeah.
And I spent a long time playing as many games as possible and just taking notes what I liked about them. And when I decided to make it into a game was when I was working on it from like about 2015 to about 2019 on this play setting, and I was like, this is how I see magic working. Magic was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was many things, but like I really didn't like the binary of arcane and divine magic, and I didn't like that arcane and divine magic functioned the same way. And if we have enough time, I can talk a little bit about that. But so I was thinking, I really need to make my own magic system, and I can. So what I did next was I started doing, here's Unearthed Arcana. We're going to use these rules and that rules, but eventually it just said, you know what, I want to make my own system, and especially because I had played games like End of the World by Fantasy Flight Games and World of Darkness, the White Wolf version. I really liked the idea of dice pools, and I thought that I could make a fantasy game that used that. The way, I don't know, I have the idea for the roll system, and from there I was like, you know what, this is a roll system I don't see being used at all. I looked out there, couldn't find it, and I said, okay, well, there's the basis, and the rest from there.
That's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm definitely pro. I push my instinct was to push back on. I agree with what your friend was saying in that I think that's good advice to say you need to have direction. Like, if you don't have a why, if you can't answer the why, I think you have to be able to answer a why, right? Like, you have to say like, well, why are you, creating your? I don't think that's a bad thing. I push back naturally against the idea of like defaulting to D&D for anything that like, well, use D&D unless you don't have to. I push back on that, but it sounds like the motivation for that advice was more of like, you got to be able to answer the why question. Like, you got to know, like, why are you making your own system? There's a lot of systems out there, right? The reality is there's a lot of systems out there. So like, why?
To his credit, he said, find a different system until you can't use any system.
So that's really, yeah.
So yeah, to his credit, he was open. But
in that case, I mean, I think that's super good advice because I think it forces you to say, like, why am I going to do this? And that just gives you it's the process, right? As you learned, like the process of having to answer that question is like refining it itself, and helping giving direction.
One of the first things I did when I started designing this was I looked up like ludology or game design stuff, and I landed on the Power 19. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
But I'd advise anybody here who's interested in RPG design. It's kind of like a post where you fill it out to talk about your TTRPG on like old forums. And so like the first few questions is talking about like what is your game about and like kind of vague stuff. And I think like I can't remember every 19 questions, but like one of them's like, what's your target audience? One of them's like, how do players advance in your game? You know, and so
Yeah.
those are really good to hammer out because
Yeah.
that way my
Hmm.
team could get on board. And we sat down and wrote all those first thing. So
So that's a good, I think, segue to talk about the team, which is,
hmm
you brought a team on board. Tell us about the team and the decision to bring people on.
yeah, so I was realizing that because the process I'd had when I started ranking this game and before when I was doing an RP, this before, is that I had a lot of players, like 50 people from across the state I
That's
played with for all
amazing.
the years.
Sorry, it's still every
So
time we get back to that idea, it's awesome.
yeah, I guess
Amazing.
yeah, it's naturally what happens. I show up to a place and they're like, "What are you into?" And I go, "D&D. Would you like me to run a group for you guys?" Anytime I hear someone hasn't played before, I'm like, I gotta
Yeah.
spread the hobby. So especially because if I can get a group to play in my world first, it's what they expect. And then they go to other things. They're like, "This is totally weird and wrong." And I'm like, "No, but if you came from D&D to me, if you came from Faerun to me, you'd be like,
Yeah.
this is weird and
This is
bizarre."
weird and wrong. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Um. Right. So the team. So ironically, the first person I contacted was a developer friend of mine who had been trying to get me to make a video game with them. And I said, I can't make a game with you, but I have been working on this project for a really long time. If you would um, be our project manager, because I know you have project management experience. I do too from, my computer college stuff. Um, I was like, but mate, you're really good at project management for developing. Could you do that for us? And he said, sure. And then he's like, who else is working on this? And I said, I don't know. And I just kind of went to all my players. I was like, anyone want to write your own thing? And I didn't ask anybody who was writing their own world because I figured they would want to write that rather than my stuff, which is true. It's how it's ended up at this point. A few of them said yes, and then kind of deered off to do their own. I mean, because if you're making your own world, it's hard to devote so much time to this. But we started out with like about 8 people who took me up on my offer, and some of them were like, "Hey, I just don't feel confident in this stuff," and I said, just go and we'll lift you up. But um, it's kind of wheeled down because of schedules or because people just kind of some of this stuff goes over people's heads when you're talking about like ratios of probability and or just like concepts and tying them together across different subsystems and everything because it is a fully like I said fully sized like D&D sized kind of RPG. um so we've come down where right now we have 3 main people including myself who work on it, and we do have a map creator who I met on Twitter. um I think his name is Synth. You can look him up in our he's in our circles and stuff. So he's on standby. He's given us a nice deal on working on maps in the future. We haven't really been able to hit him up yet because we're still working through a lot of the I think geography, redoing this geography and stuff to make it what we want. Is our next one of our next goals. And so I'm the project lead. I do writing for the lore and writing for the rules. I usually do the main of those, and then I get the others on. But where it went before I got the team together was that we had me going to everybody and being like, "What do you think about this?" And they give me their thoughts, and then I'd rewrite it, and I go, "What do you think about this?" to all of my players over and over. And then I was like, if they could actually work on it with me. So we have my one friend. I don't want to mention their names because I don't have their permission. But I
Sure.
have one friend who was that player who I actually butted heads with at the table because I'm very role play centric. I don't do a lot of combat unless like I'm like only if the players invoke combat, like they go into a dungeon looking for it, or if they bring it on themselves. But he was very get mission kind of done player, and he's really into making those advanced builds. He made like this one kobold who could like throw for 36 damage with a sling. He's that kind of crazy builder kind of guy. And so I was like,
Mhm.
I know this guy could work on the rules, and so he's done that. He's better at writing rules than I am. And the other guy's lore, and he was pretty new to RPGs. He's only played like a year and a half to 2 years now
Mhm.
as of recording this. But I heard him talking about Elder Scrolls lore like it was written on the back of his hand, and I was like, "Do you like writing?" And he's like, "Yeah, I kind of like writing." I was like, "Do you want to try writing?" And so ever since, it's never been a regret. He's been
Nice.
really great to work with, and I have some experience. He has a lack of experience, but a lot of potential. And so I kind of just milk him for all of his creativity, and he slaps my hand when I think of something too crazy. And it works pretty good. It's a lot of slapping my hands, honestly, that the group does. I'm like, what if this? And they're like, that's not important, and
Yeah.
or that's insane. We can't do that. You already said that last week. We couldn't do that. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, okay.
No, having a
So
team is so helpful for that, especially on a project of this size.
inspiration wise, honestly,
Yeah.
it is so much harder to put the hours in, but now it's just hanging out and having a good time. We act a little official when we're in the writing space, but honestly, it's just having someone else there, because it's hard when you're working towards an invisible audience, but when you have someone else there who's like, I also care about this project,
Yeah.
that's what makes the biggest difference to me, honestly.
No, that's super cool. Yeah, collaborating like that on that stuff, and it's interesting because it's different than the process of you know, if you grew up playing D&D in the environment that we did, which we were talking about like third edition. That was my first edition of D&D.
Hmm.
Like as a GM playing Dungeons and Dragons in the third edition days, which is different than sort of my ethos now. But then, like it was a singular activity. Like all my DM prep was me. It was very like eventually I was going to bring it to a group, but like it wasn't that collaborative, and I'm a collaborative person. So eventually I sort of learned to like how to I sort of learned how to do the stuff that story games do now, which is like sharing that collaborative world building and stuff like that. Like I sort of forced myself into that before the tools for that were available to me, just because like I'm naturally a collaborator. So like the idea of doing all that on my own, I chafe against, and I adore doing it with a group of people who have great ideas. Because my rule of thumb is always everyone's ideas are better than mine, and I really like other people's ideas, and
Yeah.
or at least working them out together.
Yeah, the very first time I started like working on this world was in eighth grade. I mean, I've been playing this for longer than that, but it didn't form a world with like lore other than just being loosely connected campaigns until I had a player show up when our games were canceled. A player would show up and be like, "Let's talk about how the world works and conspiracy theories." And I was like, "Okay," and we'd sit there and eat our snacks and hang out and write stuff in notebooks. And so yeah, I kind of feel bad because I've used it's almost a crutch where I've used this world so much where at some point I just stopped doing DM prep and I just showed up to
Mm.
sessions. So I was like, oh, that roll a knowledge check. I already know it. It's just and I would just kind of like whatever the players wanted to do, and so my stories are largely improv. Even to this day, I
Yeah,
my D&D notes are name what this NPC is, and I just have an NPC list, and that's about it.
yeah.
Um, I think that's the best way to do it, is just let the players kind of guide you.
Oh, I
Sometimes
totally
the
agree.
players do some crazy crap though, and that's what you asked for when you started DMing, right? So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So we got a question from the chat.
oh,
Mosberg in the
lovely.
chat said, what's your coolest DM story in your setting / game life?
Coolest DM story?
Yeah, coolest DM story I think the question is in your setting / game.
Yeah.
Like, what's the coolest DM story you have?
Uh, some of okay. That's a tough question because usually they ask for the player stories, right?
Yep.
Coolest time as a DM. A few of them stand out. See, the world is kind of not a good place to be, and so it's going to sound really weird me saying this, but there was this one time where this player, um, there was this immortal, there was a mirror, which was a prison for immortals, and the king would, if he couldn't keep an immortal in prison, would put them in this mirror, and they weren't allowed to get out. And the players had foolishly bought into one of the immortals in the mirror, asking them for a bowl of soup. And he's like, I just want to eat it. I'm not going to try to break out. And they opened up the mirror using the ritual that they were told not to do. And, this immortal takes the bowl of soup, and they all start running, all these different immortal creatures. And one of the immortals, I didn't get to talk about this, but fey creatures in our world deal with emotions. And so it was like a fairy woman who had been in the mirror, was kind of cursed with eternal sorrow, and so wherever she would feel sad, everyone around her would feel sorrow. And so the entire city, after they had let her out, had started to just like, drown in grief. And so they're like, we can't let this happen, and so part of the party decided to kill the woman to save the city from self-destructing, so to speak. And one of the players is like, no, we absolutely can't do this and stuff. And she gave this entire speech about why not to kill the immortal. And um, it was really interesting though, because we had this whole choice of like over numbers, over players and stuff, trying to decide over what to do, because I mean, this woman is cursed. Wherever she goes, people will feel enough sorrow to not be able to go on. Like, she just is a curse upon the world, but she isn't evil, you know. And so the players had to decide what they were going to do, if they were to fulfill their duty as soldiers and try to put her down and put her back in the mirror, or if they were going to let her go or try to bring her somewhere. And the players ended up, because they knew how her curse worked, ended up killing this woman. And the player who had like argued for her to live was, the woman thanked her, and then she she was asking them to end it. And the next session, that player was just like, I don't know how my character's going to go on. And so they had to find a way. Then like everyone thought that she had been cursed by the sorrow and stuff. But that player ended up just like, that morning afterwards, just watching the players, like, this one player is like in real life just sad about the situation, and the other player is like trying to console her, and she's like, you're the ones who killed her, how dare you console me, and everything. And so it was interesting. And there's some other good some good stories. I don't know, but really just I think the Fae are the most interesting thing. And they bring up a lot of the stories, because their whole thing is that you have spirits which exist in the material of the world, and they kind of inhabit all of the magic that makes the world work. They are basically the forces of nature. And then Fae are like the dream world that's among us, and it's also, they can come into this world through our emotions and stuff. So just thinking of the different emotions, I mean, right now I have an NPC that makes people, she's cursed by a Fae of excitement, and so it's like having coffee being around her. One of my group just had a good time, like just role playing the idea that this person tries to calm down everyone who comes near her. And my player was like, "Can I fidget with something?" She's like, "Of course. I have a ball and cup on me. I keep it because people always do this." So just things like that. Just playing with these ideas of, and the morality and stuff too. I have some players get really into the religion, the religions of the world, and have religious debates over hypothetical religions, which is great, because it's awesome. Like Thanksgiving, but no one's getting upset.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
So anyway.
Right, exactly. Very cool. Very cool. So what's the plan going forward, as far as I know you're off your time schedule? What's you had mentioned that it all took a lot longer than you thought. Is it, what I'm saying? Like, is it sort of what's driving it? Is there a timeline, or is it more of like creativity is driving it?
Yeah, so when I said we were off our timeline, it's because we were naive and it was our first game, and I thought, hey, 6 months to make a combat system, we can test that at least. Then it's become much more.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so we are right now, our lore team and our rule team, which is, it used to mean something, but now it's the lore guy, the rule guy. Sure. And we got another rule guy, but he can't show up very often because of work.
Sure.
It's the lore guy and I have been able to meet every week. The rule guys have had a lot more work issues, but in general, also rules work is much slower, just because it's much more to chew through conceptually. But lore guy, lore team, we are done with most of the lore that needs to be done for this stage in our development. We got how magic works and everything, all that done, and the world, the timeline and all that. So our lore team is going to be working on an anthology series that will be accessible for people to kind of read while we're still developing the game itself. Short stories, like 5-page long stories, maybe longer, called Adverse Legends. The rules team and I are still working on our alpha test, and if people are interested in testing for that, they should just contact us on Twitter and sign up. We don't have an official sign up yet, but if you want to, we'd be happy to
Cool.
sign up and get you the information when we're ready. But we don't really do any deadlines because this is not a monetized project. It's all volunteer at this time. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there's something to be said, right, for letting the work dictate itself. Like, I mean, assuming you're not stalling, right? Because that is the downside
nope.
of not having, assuming that a project continues forward, letting it sort of like the creativity and the need for to drive the outcome, I think is something to be said for
Yeah,
that.
and that's not to say we don't work on a schedule. We
Yeah,
do
sure.
at least 3 hours a week, and there's some weeks like before when we had this before the unfortunate events that postponed this episode. I had done 16 hours that week just to get ready for it and
Oh
everything.
no, I'm so sorry.
I
Oh my
thought you'd
gosh.
want to talk about the religions, so I finished the religion chapter.
Oh, I feel
But
so
then but
bad
then
now.
we've gotten such a good conversation. No, don't feel bad. It's all free work I put into my project.
All right, fair enough. All right. I feel bad that we had to postpone. Well, we can talk more about the religion stuff.
Yeah,
I,
but
I
thanks to whoever gave that question in the chat, by the way.
yeah. So Mosberg threw another question out there, which is, what's the most fun NPC that you've created in LOA?
Most fun one. There are two that come to mind. There's one that my players really like. Okay, my favorite NPC I ever made was named Matthias Myrmidon. He was a gnome who had used Gotham magic, which is a thing in the universe where you change the nature of your soul. And so he had made himself into a magic item, and so he was a chest in which there was an inner world. And so basically, he's a god within this pocket dimension. But his problem is he made himself immortal this way almost, but he's not able to leave. It's like a simulacrum of himself inside this chest. And so he always trades information about current events for magic items or something. And the rule is that you can bring anything in and take anything out, but like you can't take anything he's dreamt up out of there. It's like everything's real within there, but he could make a city in there, and it wouldn't be you wouldn't be able to take the bricks out. But anything that was brought in previously can be taken out, and he has all these artifacts from all my players from before, because people store things with him since it's very safe to store things with him. And so he's this scrutinous little gnome who's very polite, and every time a murder hobo ends up in the box, it's a huge mistake. And it's a good time. I've had players find this chest before and then shove other players into it. There was two groups who were fighting each other. When I was at college, I had other DMs running my world, and we all had, if the two groups met on the map, we'd have a co-session.
Love it.
And the two groups fought, and one of them shoved the unconscious player into the box, and the gnome's just like, why have you done this? I've had other players leave sacred blades of legend with him, and he's like, I'll take care of this. And then other players come there to get them, and he's like, same player, different character, so he's not going to let you have it. And I don't know, this is a good time. He's very he likes to play with riddles, but he's not like a big riddler. He just really does not he doesn't really let players get past his he's very wise, and he's like, I might have been in a box for thousands of years, but I know a thief when I see one. You're not going to get to stuff. And the other one would be Sola. She was a part of the recent game that I played with with the people developing the game, and she came from an isolated island, and one of the players had shipwrecked there as a child, and so their story was getting off of that island and then going back home after living amongst the uncivilized mystic people of the island. And Sola was an uncivilized person who had heard stories of these kingdoms and like wanted to be a princess, but her mother was like had died when she was young, and so she was kind of like mistreated by these cannibal different tribes and everything, trying to survive on the island. She met the other players when they were all children, and when they got off the island together, she's like, I want to be a princess someday. And it was just kind of funny because the player who had gotten there had been a princess who had shipwrecked on an island and become like a tough archer girl, and the tough archer girl wanted to become her. And so it was kind of funny because they were friends, but they were headed in opposite directions. So it was always fun to run Sola. She was very bombastic too.
Hmm. Do major world NPCs play a pretty big role in LOA? Like, kind of like Faerun, how like one of the things you could say that
Um,
there's all these named NPCs that take a lot of space up in the world.
yeah, world leaders a lot, and important like founders of organizations, that kind of thing. You're not gonna. I mean, we might release some kind of NPC folio down the line, but our intention is that like, we try to leave a lot of like shakers and movers in the current era. Things, there's always space for players to grow into and take spaces. Like of note would be the Sword Corps, is what we're calling them right now. They're the wielder of these sacred blades, these blades that are like ancient and were made by the many kingdoms, like to defeat this. Like there was a time where demons like tried to invade the entire world and blah blah blah. Any setting you can. Anyway, we made sure that the wielder of like the most powerful legendary blade has gone off, and so whatever happened to the blade after that is unknown. So that way we don't have some NPC wielding. This like uber sword. But yeah, there's important NPCs. Uh, the Defiant Seven, when death came into the world, everyone started to die. And the Defiant Seven were 7 people who invented. They are the inventors of the ways to defy death, like lichdom and stuff like that. So the Defiant Seven are pretty important NPCs, and they became world leaders because everyone else kind of fell from, because no one wrote down knowledge because no one died, right? And so when everyone died, kind of, and there's like the next generation, that's kind of what caveman times in this world is that there's like these necropolises of the people from before death, like the Eden cities, pretty much. And then and these people who don't know anything, kind of like seeing these ancient forerunner stuff or progenitor stuff, and then the Defiant Seven are 7 people who are around in Eden times. I'm saying Eden because
No, I know what you're saying.
that's the idea. You know what I'm saying?
But before,
so those 7 people, like there's the Cain character in our world, the first murderer is one of them. He accidentally murdered somebody, and so death entered the world through him, and so he got the way to see people's fates, see the end times, the apocalypse, and how he can see. And so he's like, man, I need to solve death. Like, I can't let anyone else die after I killed my friend. So he's trying to do that. There's Balthazar the Black, the first Lich, and he was like, well, magic people are superior because I defy death using magic. And so he created this whole society where it was pretty bad, where you have sorcerers being like the top caste, the people who can cast naturally, and then people who can learn magic, and then those who couldn't learn magic were like the low dregs. And he created a pretty oppressive society. And I could go on. There's seven different ways that people defy death. And so those NPCs are important to history, but you're not gonna. And like Balthazar the Black, for example, he's out there, never quite dead after a god smacked him down. And he's just kind of lurking in the Shadow Realm for a DM to bring back, but where he's not important enough to. You're never gonna run into an NPC where it's like, this guy's the main character, you're sitting on the side. We don't want that, so we're trying to prevent that as much as possible, and not to create too many special people who break the rules of the universe or anything like that. So
we got Mosberg keeps breaking the questions out in the chat. I'm gonna
hit me, man.
He's writing them. I'll keep saying them. What aspects of the White Wolf system, you mentioned the World of Darkness, besides the dice pool element, do you think influenced or do you pay homage to in LOA?
We wanted to move away from the morality system.
Yeah.
Because the morality system in White Wolf, in my opinion, is so severe. I mean, they're like average persons at 7, but like you pickpocket from somebody and you're going down to maybe getting crazy. So we do have, but like the derangements in White Wolf, I was inspired by that as a form of negative advancement. So if you look at the derangements in White Wolf, they're a little less nuanced as far as mental illness stuff goes, but in general, I like the edgy derangement system from White Wolf, and we take a lot of inspiration from that with our mental afflictions. Other than that, let me think. Our combat is pretty hardlined, which White Wolf's is not. One thing I will not take from White Wolf, I'm sorry to say, but there's one thing about White Wolf Publishing's World of Darkness that struck me as bad
Mm.
was that their formatting in their books. If you've ever played their game, trying to find a rule at a particular time, I'm running a World of Darkness game right now on my Friday group, and I had to go through and highlight wherever a rule mention was and set up bookmarks in the PDF that I have. I do own the books, by the way. Um, support your creators, but I had to make bookmarks myself because it was getting very hard to look up rules, especially
Mm.
because they like to mix their. We do have lore integrated with our rules, but we keep it like this, or maybe like this. They're kind of,
Mm.
you don't want to be reading about Dracula while you're trying to read about his line of blood and what it does in the vampire stuff.
Mm. Hmm.
So that's one thing. I really like their idea of virtue and vice. However,
Yeah.
so think about working that in again. But generally, I'm trying to think of anything else as a hallmark of the system, and right at the moment, it's not.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
their Mage the Awakening and Vampire the Masquerade disciplines and their Arcana system is going to be you'll see the threads in our magic system that they're close, but we are different.
Mm.
But you'll see threads there. So if you like that kind of general, here's a subject of matter, and you make up the spells as you go kind of thing, that is kind of an inspiration of our book.
Okay.
We want spells to be able to work
Yeah.
with martial stuff, but we do have a system right now where, and I hate to talk about this because this is literally last weekend we started working on the
Uh,
magic system
oh,
2 weeks
that I
ago.
was going to ask you because you mentioned earlier in the conversation about the magic system, the not wanting arcane and divine magic to work the same way, and I thought, well, that's I wanted to circle back to that. So I don't know how
Yeah.
much you can say about it, but I'd love to talk about that.
Well, so we have two systems: the magic system and devotion system. We call
Okay.
it a devotee is someone who follows a god,
Okay.
or a pantheon. We don't have any religions that follow a single god,
Okay.
yet. Yeah, we have one that's anyway.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. You
All
get
right,
a lot of
devotion
information in
system.
your head, so it's hard
Yeah.
because it just starts to come out. I get it. I get it.
One of the through lines of our game is that we want it so that there are no classes and there is no level progression. It's just XP progression, like White Wolf. There you go. To
Oh,
answer
there you
your
go.
earlier question. Um, so the idea here is how do you do like divine magic? We wanted it so that an average person who has none of the disciplines, like our like big ability acquisition things, could still do should still get benefits from praying. So we have three things
I
to
love
our like
that.
divine system. Yep, at any time you can pray to a god and get a small benefit, but it does
I
take
love that.
about 10 minutes.
I love that.
Yep. There's 5 types of prayer. Off the top of my head, there's communion, contrition, um, forgiveness or absolution or something, whatever. There's 5 areas of prayer, and religions will have access to 2 out of 5 to 3 out of 5 of those. And the idea is that you can basically do a prayer to your god as long as you have the materials and stuff. So, like Aztec religions in real life, there's like the deity impersonation type thing where they like put on the headdress and everything. And you become like your god or whatever. There's benefits for that where you like roll a perform check to do it. But anyway, there's many different kinds of prayer, and every character can do prayer. The second thing that religions have in the game are rituals. Rituals require certain levels of clergyhood, as well as like maybe a congregation. You have to kind of like set up the ritual, and then you're able to do like a thing. And the thing was like, sorry, do a thing, achieve the ritual's
Sure.
goal.
Sure.
And so with prayers, it's very individual. I'm giving myself a bonus. I might be giving someone else a bonus. I'm like Gnomon invocation is one of our prayers, which is invoking the name of your god, and it weakens the auras and effects of other gods nearby. Obviously, people doing that back and forth is a thing, but it might null out. But anyway, these are very weak effects. The prayers by themselves. Rites are and prayers are not religion specific. They're just areas of prayers accessible to based on religion. And then rituals are religion specific to get really direct to each religion having their own. And then the last thing is miracles, which is available to like saint characters, or some character is going to go into those devotion trees and be able to perform like miracles, and they're based on their power, is what we call them, because it's not just gods like Archfey, demons and stuff, on the dark side of things, whatever. You are able to invoke powers of the world to do these things, and that's where the devotion system comes from. So warlocks and priests are in the same sphere of things in this world. So yeah, those are our three sets of things, and the rituals kind of ties into the faction system, because one of the faction benefits you can get is an ordination. If you're leveling up in a faction, you can get ordinated to do more and more major rituals for your religion, and you might need like 4 tier 3 faction members to do something. So if you're in the religion sphere in the game, you're going to be relying on your church faction to provide you priests to do your stuff, and you might be coming with a congregation. Who knows?
That's cool. That's really fun.
Yeah, I really like the religion aspect of the game because it's where you get a lot of the cool lore. And we also have, for each religion, has several sects. Saying that word is hard, but with a CT.
Yes, yes, I know what you mean.
And each religion has several sects, so within each religion there is going to be controversy of different believers. If you're a Colossian, you can either be your average brand guy, or you could be a Justicarian who believes in the really hard rules of things and be like an extremist kind of guy.
I love that.
It's up to you.
No, I love that. So, I think that not enough, I at least in my experience, I haven't experienced enough fantasy settings with fantasy pantheons where like there is like churches or like religions to a god or a pantheon, and then like subsects and disagreements within that about the deity. Like I love that stuff because it's true to life, and I feel like there's just not quite enough of that in my experience. I'm not saying it's not out there. There might be fantasy settings that do a lot of that I just haven't experienced or played.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's my favorite stuff too. I mean,
yeah.
Kalosianism is the religion off of Kalos, the god of justice. And he's known as the divine Justicar, okay? He's the guy who keeps that law of all the gods agreeing that I talked about before.
Yeah.
He's the law keeper.
Right.
And so his whole thing of his different sects is like I said, the Justicarians believe in the ancient myth, because before there was this whole writing, they said there was like the Justicar will come again and judge everyone. And they're like, you have to be completely adherent to the old law. Well, Kalos had come down and taken human form at one point. He's kind of a Jesus kind of character in the universe, where he was a god who gave up his power to become mortal to just kind of see what people were doing, so he could write a new law, kind of like the New Covenant. I really did, take some biblical inspiration with Kalos. And so there's the new law and the old law, and Justicarians are like old law, and but they're very strict about it. And one of the things with Kalos' religion is that they believe very much in omission, to deny pleasures, to it's like, well, omission to them is like and to not involve yourself. Someone personally is getting hurt, and you don't involve yourself because you love them. You involve yourself because the other thing is evil, must be destroyed. They're very Jedi, like old prequel Jedi, where they're like, no emotions,
Right.
Yeah. And then there's the Custodian, like there's the other versions of Kalosianism where they're the Custodians, I think they're called, and their whole thing is, well, the perfect law for the law god to follow is the Dwarven tradition, and they are all about like the Dwarven laws are the holy law, and so they're dwarves who took on this religion from the Midlands and kind of made it their own. And so like cultures, religions kind of blend together in this, and we kind of try to think about how these religions would form over time and challenge themselves and stuff.
Yeah, I love that because it makes it true to life.
Yeah,
as true to life, I guess, as a fantasy religion pantheon could be, but like human nature, or like how religion follows from human nature, and
yeah, and I mean, you got to think people trade in a market; they're going to share their ideas about what's up there,
Yeah,
and that's kind of what we try to do. Is like, we have these religions forming in their areas of influence; they're very close to the culture there, and then they kind of evolve as their story reaches other areas.
Yeah, I think that scale is one of the things that sometimes people who, forget when writing, or maybe forget's not the right word, but I think a lot of people struggle with scale in the ancient world, right? Like scale was so different than it is now. It's hard for us as modern people to even fathom how scale worked. Like your scale was so much smaller. Other people
Hmm.
have written about this in like design and in fantasy stuff, like about that idea of scale. So it's certainly not. So there's a lot of people who have written about this, but like your world was so small if you were an ancient person, it's hard for us
Yeah,
as modern people to really understand what that was like.
yeah. I mean, this world is huge, but to the average person, they're not adventurers. They're not seeing all the world, and so they know what their lord tells them, or they know what their governor tells them, and what their church tells them. They don't know much else, and what they experience around them, you know. And I like to work into the religions, things like the Fae that we discussed earlier. They're emotional creatures. They come in through your emotions and into this world. Well, Colossianism is like we'll use rituals to ban them. We will hide our emotions and stop their emotions. You know, they basically do the paladin slaying thing to Fae. While like the Hashika religion are like these mystics who are like their approach is to deal with negative emotions. They think that like dealing with your environment comes inward, kind of like a feng shui type thing.
Mm.
And they also take it to their communities that if you are a turbulent person, a troublemaker, you might be excommunicated from the area, you know. But they don't. They welcome Fae in and allow them to dwell in their emotional space, you know, which is kind of interesting. They just kind of like try to turn it to the light side, you know,
Mm.
more than cut and burn, which means the Colossians come and cut and burn them. But you know, that's
Hmm.
that's fantasy settings for you, right? So.
Exactly. So you mentioned before the show, I think before we started streaming, you have some other books there that you wrote for.
Oh yeah. So before, when I discussed my origin story, I said Windmill Slam Games gave me my first opportunity to write. So this here, if you ever want to see what my writing looks like before I'm able to release this game, take a look at this. This is the Monsters, and I think my camera's backwards, but the
We
Monsters
could
and
see it.
Magic
Yep.
book
Or I.
by
Yeah, you're good. I'm
by
looking at the
Windmill
stream. We're
Slam
good.
Games there.
Yeah.
So yeah. And so yeah, this book was created by I'm gonna say their name again, Windmill Slam Games. Um, and the long story short, they were just reaching out for anybody who might want to write, and I was gonna flip through and show you just a
Yeah.
picture from inside here, but I
Please do.
realized this is one of the work in progress print copies
Oh,
that was has bad clipping and stuff through it, so I don't want to represent their product poorly.
I see. Okay.
Um,
Gotcha.
I have like 4 versions on my shelf because I was the one receiving them from the printer for a while. But long story short, they saw my play setting version and they were like, "Well, you can write. Do you want to design monsters?" And I ended up designing like 13 or 14 maybe for this book. I don't want
Nice.
to overshoot. I don't want to overshoot my estimate, but
Nice. That's awesome.
I don't know. I can't count it on stream either. But you
Sure.
know, eight to 14, somewhere in that range. You know, someone will correct me. But I designed some monsters for this one. They
Cool.
also have a new one coming out, the Book of Cults, which is the Monsters of Magic 2, and I wrote an entire chapter for that. And the funny thing is, when I wrote this one, it was supposed to be about fairy tales, and I snuck in one LOA monster.
Nice.
And then he's like, "Hey, for our Book of Cults, do you want to write anything?" And I was like, "Can I expand on that monster?" So the Book of Cults has the Hive Tyrants in there, and I would want to explain more, but that was stuff I got paid for, and so telling you too much about it might discourage you from buying the book. So if you want to see what I write, like, there's a very LOA-esque scenario in the Book of Cults around this religion that is not a religion. Um, it's a bunch of creatures that pose as religious figures and basically have you build a temple, which is their nest, and they eat you. And the cult that kind of benefits from that and surrounds it. So I'll let
Cool.
you guys check that out. But
Yeah.
this
And if you want
Monsters
to,
Magic 1 is
mhm.
pretty reasonable price if you guys can find it.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah, if you want to send
right
me
through
link,
RPG.
yeah, I was gonna say if you want to send me a link to that, I'll put it in the show notes for this episode. So if people
Okay,
are
great.
watching this on YouTube later or on Twitch VOD or whatever, or YouTube especially, you'll be able to just it's there in the notes already. I think I'm
Yeah,
predicting the
I
future,
also
but
wrote one page of this book, which is also extremely affordable. I think it's like only it's under it's both of these are got to be under $30 to 20. Don't quote me, but they're
yeah,
pretty affordable, especially for print. But I wrote one page of this because they needed someone to fill a crack. They were having a bit of drywall, or they're hitting a bit of a wall. So there's one page of that book.
That one's harder to read. Can you read us the title of that one?
This is Galley and Grumble Terrific Travels, over 150 encounters for role-playing games. And what I really like about this one is it's like rest stops, basically, places to stay for the night.
Nice.
And there's also recipes or whatever from this like orc who cooks up monsters. Cool. So this one's really cool, too. I wrote about a chapel that is destroyed and then recreates itself every night.
Oh, neat. That's really cool. Very cool. Yeah. Awesome. So where can people, how can people follow Lands of Adversity on social, and how can people connect with it if they want to follow the project?
Right. This is where I wish I had a splash screen for you, but it's
LO. You know what? Adversity. Other streamers that I'm friends with, they do that, and they're really better. I got to get better at that. They switch over to something that has it all up on the screen. So maybe I'll get better at that. But
all right. Everywhere we are, we're LO Adversity with a capital L and a capital A. We have a link tree, and you can access all of our link tree from any of our platforms. That means we're most active on Twitter because we got the most reception there, but we also have a YouTube channel and Facebook. The YouTube channel has all of our team members did a stream in December, so they're there if you want to hear more about them. And also, I think that one explains all of our world history written out. So, if you want to go check that out. And when we're on Facebook and mainly Twitter, though, LO Adversity.
And I just linked in the chat on Twitch right now live the link tree, and the link tree was it's in the YouTube show notes right now from the live stream, and it'll be permanently in the show notes on YouTube.
Yeah, so. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, thanks for taking the time to come on Holy Happy Hour.
It was too much fun. I wish I could just come and hang out with you on the weekend, but
yeah. Well, who knows? Maybe sometime I'll get to play Lands of Adversity, and then.
I would love that.
I would love that too. I would love that. So I'm gonna have Jack hang out in my digital green room. I almost said green screen. That's the wrong thing. My digital green room. So we're gonna say goodbye to Jack as soon as I get the right tab up. Do that. And okay, yeah. Now we're back to just me here. As we say goodbye, I got a couple of post show notes for you all out there. Hey, thanks everybody for watching. Huge thanks again to Jack for making the time to come on the show, talk to us about Lands of Adversity. This is probably the most in-depth into one single world we've gotten into, which I love. I love that. We could have gone even deeper into all the stuff, as you heard, and I just love how much we got to do that. So it was super fun. So huge thanks to him. Huge thanks to Lands of Adversity team. Huge thanks to all of you for watching. Hey, please don't forget to hit that follow button here on Twitch so that you can support what we do. You can get updates when we go live with episodes for this and other streams we might do here at That Gamer Priest, which is my Twitch channel. And of course, you can subscribe on YouTube. Hit subscribe and you'll get every episode both live. You can watch live on YouTube. You can watch after the fact on YouTube. Watch all of our episodes. We've ported everything over to the YouTube channel now. There is all of the past episodes of our show are now on the one single YouTube channel, which is called Holy Happy Hour Batman. So that was sort of a little bit of a tweak there, and so it's all there on YouTube now. Hey, if you want to promote what we do, which is deep conversations about TTRPGs and especially the intersection with spirituality, philosophy, psychology, and religion, you can subscribe. We got Mossberg in the Mossberg said, I am Jack's digital green screen. Also, Mossberg said you should have called this drink I am Jack's adversarial martini, which is funny. But speaking of subscribers, Mossberg's our first and number one subscriber there on in the chat. And if you would like to support the show, you can subscribe also. We'd really appreciate it if you did. If you only caught part of tonight's show, you'll be able to head to allportsopen.com. It's our network. You can watch every episode of the show afterward at allportsopen.com. You can find Holy Happy Hour Batman on YouTube, as I said, where you can watch all of our episodes. Hey, check out all the shows on our network. We've got great shows like Delinquent Comics, a really fun Masks actual play podcast. I've been saying lately it's an anti-fascist, anti-corporate Masks AP podcast about a group of 4 delinquent superheroes. Anyway, I won't say more than that about it, but it's fun and you should check it out. A huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my Apon co-founder, for the artwork on the stream, for everything that he does for the network. Thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on the show. Don't forget, folks, go to Apon Games on itch. I've released 2 games over the weekend. 2 games. And they're very affordable. You can get both of them for $3, theoretically, because one of them is pay what you want and you can pay 0. The other one is $3 or more for that game. So, hey, check those games out at Ape, and we're going to be doing more at Apon Games on it. So make sure you hit follow there too. So, all right, without further ado, I am That Gamer Priest Ben. We will be back next week for the 1-year anniversary special episode. The legendary designer Meg Baker is joining us here. The designer of Apocalypse World, Powered by the Apocalypse, with her husband Vince, and many other great and amazing games, is going to be interviewing me. Meg is taking over Holy Happy Hour as our guest host for the show. And so, yeah, it's a little overwhelming. Because of circumstances like we talked about on this episode, we had to postpone it from last week. Very sad circumstances, honestly. I'm very grateful that we're going to be doing it next week, and I hope you'll join us. So don't miss it. All right, I'm Ben. I already said that. Enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours, my friends. I'm going to send you into the ether here with a Delinquent Comics ad, and I hope to see you next week for the anniversary episode. Bye-bye, everybody.
Calling all citizens of Halcyon City. The newest generation of heroes are now painting the pages of Delinquent Comics, a Masks new generation actual play podcast. Complete back issues are available now on allportsopen.com, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever podcasts are found. You can help join the fight and hear the newest releases early by becoming a supporter on Patreon at patreon.com/allportsopen. New bi-weekly episodes become available to all citizens on May 24th, featuring the newest arc, The Sunset Island Saga.